Hi, my name is Rahul Sachdev. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Fortella, a revenue-driven marketing company. I've been in the B2B marketing space for over 20 years, both as a B2B CMO, as well as working or running marketing technology companies. The pressures on the CMOs have really increased over the last 20 years. CMOs need to be not just master tacticians of campaigns, but strategic drivers of revenue growth. Those CMOs that can make that shift will continue to thrive, and those that can't will move on. So for today's conversation, I'm joined by two respected colleagues. Why don't I ask you guys to introduce yourselves to our audience?
Great, thank you, Rahul. Chuck Boynton, I'm the CFO of Poly. It's a public company, the merger of Plantronics and Polycom. I've been there for a little less than a year. Before that, I was the CFO at SunPower, a large public solar company, and then before that was the CFO of several other public and private companies, including Intellidan, Rahul, where we worked together about 15 years ago.
And I'm Venkat Nagaswamy. I run marketing at 8x8. We are a cloud provider for business communications. I came to this company as a result of my company, Mariana IQ, being acquired by 8x8. Mariana IQ is a deep learning for marketing platform. And I started that as a result of some insight that I got when I ran enterprise marketing at Juniper Networks. This topic is very close to my heart, so I'm really, really glad to be here.
So today, for the audience, what we want to talk about are what we call the 5 rules of revenue-driven marketing. I'm going to go through each one of those, guys, and would love to hear and ask you some questions and get your thoughts on each one of those points.
Sounds great.
Awesome.
Okay. So the rule number 1 of revenue-driven marketing is to align marketing to revenue. I strongly believe that marketing strategy should align with your corporate goals, especially revenue goals. I recently read a study by the firm Spencer Stuart that said the median tenure of CMOs declined from 34 months to 28 months in the last 5 years. So that's astonishing to me, given that a CMO has just over 2 years to craft and execute their marketing strategy and show impact. Now, I don't think CMOs have suddenly become less effective over the last 5 years. I think this is really more about change of expectations at the CXO and the board level. What do CEOs, CFOs, and the board expect from the modern CMO?
Clearly, every business is designed, or their mission is to make money and grow revenue. I mean, that is the core tenet of every business. And the CMO plays an integral role in helping that company grow revenue and grow profitability. And so their goal would be things like driving lead generation, awareness of the product so that customers can buy and transact. And they play a really critical role in managing and creating that funnel so sales can go execute and close transactions.
What's happened over the past 10 years or so is rise of digital, rise of SaaS, both of which contribute towards increasing role for CMOs and marketing within B2B organizations. Specifically with Salesforce and being able to measure the activities and so on. That kind of visibility that we've been getting, we haven't had in the past. And once people started getting that visibility, and once the importance of marketing to a SaaS company started going up, that put CMOs and marketing in the prime position of having to deliver to the board and to the CEOs and CFOs. So every day I get asked this question around, hey, what's your pipeline, what's your pipeline? And that expectation of the fact that marketing needs to deliver pipeline that then converts has gone up significantly over the past 5-10 years, far more than what it used to be, let's say 15-20 years ago.
So when you think about, when you create your corporate plan, how do you determine marketing's expected impact on that corporate plan?
Well, I think, first of all, you'd start with what is the business model of the company. In other words, what's the revenue plan by geography or product? What are the growth expectations? And then the traditional model would be what percentage of sales or revenue should marketing be? And that's really an expectation of revenue growth. If you're not growing revenue, why would you spend a lot of money on marketing? If you're going to grow revenue, you need to invest in marketing to build awareness, lead gen, and all those great activities that support the ability to grow top line.
As Chuck was saying, it starts off with the revenue plan. Finance gives us targets based on regions and segments. We sell to 3 segments, small, medium, and large. and we sell in about 20 geographies. So based on the revenue plan, finance gives us a bookings target. And once we get the bookings target, we convert that into a pipeline target that we have for ourselves. And in going from bookings targets to pipeline targets, we look at the dynamics of each of the regions and dynamics of the segments. What are the timeline does it take from conversion from pipeline to final bookings conversion? How big are the deal sizes? What's the conversion rate? So we take all of these things and then figure out what the pipeline that we need to generate in each quarter by segment, by region. So that clearly defines a connection between the overall revenue goals that the company has to the marketing, the contribution that marketing makes.
That actually dovetails into our rule number 2, which is measure marketing's contribution to revenue. So one of the recommendations that we make to CMOs is to specifically measure how they can contribute to the company's revenue plan. And a mistake that I've seen CMOs make over the number of years is really to start with their tactical metrics, like event registrations or website visitors or social media followers. Those are great. But start with your strategic KPIs and determine how you're going to impact the company's revenue. So Chuck, which KPIs as a CFO do you like to see from marketing?
Well, so as a finance guy, the most sort of critical would be things like return on investment. So clearly when you do a budgeting process, whether it's your AOP, your annual operating plan, or your quarterly updates, you're going to go through a bunch of detailed metrics that could be customer acquisition cost or cost per lead or cost per click or at the detailed level. But at the uber level for a CFO, it's really what's the return on the investment? If I'm putting money into a program, I want to measure what's the return I'm getting. And in marketing, many times people say, I can't do it, it's too hard. And I would say, no, you have to create a model that is, this is what I expect to happen, and then be able to measure that this is what actually happened. And you learn a lot in that variation. And I think part of a great marketing person is the ability to understand the financial connection between what am I spending and what is the return on that spend. And if you can't measure it, then I'd question, why are you spending that money?
So how do you determine what exactly you're going to measure? And what's hard about it?
There are certain things in marketing that you can readily measure, certain things that you cannot, right? So for instance, a lot of our spending goes into direct response. And direct response marketing, given the lack of relatively few touches that we have, we can measure it directly. On the other hand, awareness metrics are harder to measure. So nevertheless, what we do is we start off with pipeline, and then we break it down, the pipeline targets, and then we break it down by channel. From which lead source or campaign am I expected to get what kind of pipeline, and then there are sub-metrics within that is what I measure, right? So for instance, Google AdWords is an important metric for us, or important source for us. For that, we look at the cost per click, we look at conversion rates, we look at all the other intermediate metrics for that, but all of these things filter into the pipeline. Pipeline is the main goal that we look at. Even in awareness, we are getting better. One other thing that I want to point out is radio ads is an interesting area. Back in the day, again, you used to do before and after awareness metrics, but one of the things that we can do today because of big data and data collection is the instant when the ad was aired in a specific geography, and based on instrumentation of the website, you can look at the traffic that came before and after.
As a CMO, one thing I never understood was the dark art of how budgets get assigned. So maybe you could share that insight with our audience. How do you determine how much money, how much budget to assign to marketing?
Yeah, and there's many ways that companies do budgeting and forecasting, but I would say it typically starts with the annual operating plan. Many companies call AOP or the op plan, and that really is, we start with what does the industry growth rates look like? You'll look at it by product, by geography, by product segment, and you'll say this product in this segment, according to industry research, is growing at 8% or 15% or whatever the number is. We then say, should we be growing faster or slower than the market based on our product portfolio and our attributes? We then align on, okay, well, we're going to grow at 9%. We then build the model to say, revenue for that product is growing at 9%. Therefore, what are the sales metrics that you need, sales coverage to close that amount of business? And then you'd say, what is the other things like in marketing? What kind of marketing spend should you get to build pipeline to support that growth rate? The marketing piece is really the key because that's the tip of the spear. If you don't have the lead gen and the awareness and the campaigns to go generate those opportunities, sales can't really sell, or the channel can't really sell. You start with that economic model. What's the profitability I'm looking at with the given growth rate? And it's sort of a timeless model that I'd say most companies follow, that sort of general formula for budgeting and forecasting.
Fortella's rule number 3 for revenue-driven marketing is to plan marketing mix around revenue. So CMOs need to determine which combination of tactics are going to best work for them. And we know in this digital-first world, you have a lot of choices. You could do ads, you could do email, content syndication, search, events, social. How do you create that optimal mix of the plethora of choices in this digital-first world that you have? How do you decide what to do, what not to do?
So what we do is, once we get the pipeline target, we said, okay, here is the pipeline target that we have. And because we have good experience based on history in terms of lead sources, we know the conversion rates, et cetera, of each of the lead sources. We know the cost per lead of each lead sources. But the dynamics of each of these lead sources are different. Some are constrained by the market and what can be provided, and some are within our control, right? A classic example for market is Google searches. The number of searches in Google is relatively flat for generic terms that people are searching for. You can bid on those, and there is some degree of control that you have, but the overall searches itself is a given. On the other hand, when we do outbound marketing, email, phone calls, other kinds of outbound marketing, those are under our control. So what we do is to first start off with the most efficient way of that we know how, and in our case, it's lead aggregators. So we take that and we fill up the bucket as much as we can. And once we fill up the bucket, then we go over to other lead sources. And once that is done, then we say, okay, given the gap that we have, how much more do I need to do from an outbounding perspective or from things that I directly control that could make up the pipeline?
And I think many times CMOs and marketing professionals don't really know what is the cost of that customer acquisition. And they may go throw money at a trade show that yields that's the wrong target. And so you get a bunch of business cards and leads, but they're not the right ones that convert. Or they run a program which may not deliver the intended results. One point in my career, I was at a company and our business in Germany was suffering badly, and they came up with a plan to go sponsor a soccer team, or a football team, as they may say there. And it kind of got fast-tracked through, and it was a sponsorship that really didn't have the data or ROI built in. It was like, we have to go do this because the business is suffering. It was a multi-year, millions of dollars of cash burned with very little new customer business. And there's many examples like that I think are painful for both CMOs and CFOs when you see that amount of money wasted that could be put towards programs that actually drive revenue and drive bottom line results.
So Fortella's rule number 4 is to execute, measure, and adjust around your revenue goals. What's hard about the B2B business is you have long sales cycles, multiple touches, and marketing's performance today will have an impact on your revenue tomorrow, right? And that's hard. So the visibility into your future performance is important, but hard to measure. And you really need, we believe, some sort of a navigational dashboard of your current performance and some leading indicators of where you will end up. So Venkat, which KPIs do you look at on a daily or a weekly basis that give you the confidence that the company and you will make your number 1 or 2 quarters from now?
The dynamics of each of our businesses in terms of segments are very different. When it comes to small business, leads that are created like today will close for the most part within 3 to 4 weeks. I mean, as in revenue in the door, right? On the other hand, when it comes to our mid-market and enterprise, it takes much longer for that to happen. So there are 2 sets of metrics that I look at for both. One, I need to know whether I'm going to make my pipeline target for this quarter. That's one that I need to know. Secondly, I also need to know whether for mid-market and enterprise, whether they'll have enough pipeline in 2 quarters' time when things would land, whether they'll have enough pipeline at that stage or not. We look at number of leads that come in. We look at quarter-to-date pipeline, and then how we compare that with what did we do last quarter, and then we look at what did we do relative to the targets a year ago this quarter, so that gives us the seasonality within the quarter. And we also look at the pacing within the quarter. What did I do last week relative to 90 days the past 90 days? That gives me the trend that we're going. So those metrics give me a sense of whether I'm going to make the pipeline numbers this quarter. That still doesn't tell me whether the company is going to make the number in future quarters or not. For that, we look at conversion. We also look at, in terms of whether we're generating enough pipeline for the bookings to happen from our sales colleagues, we look at the stages. Once we hand it over to the sales guys, we look at the stages and we look at the velocity at which the deals are going through the stages to look at whether we have enough of a balanced pipeline. So those two sets of metrics give us a sense of whether I'm going to make my number and whether the company is going to make our numbers.
As a public company, every quarter you set guidance to Wall Street and you say, where do you expect the business to land? Typically revenue, EBITDA, EPS, an earnings metric. And you want to have confidence you're going to deliver on those numbers. And so there are certain businesses in Poly today that are turns businesses that basically customers order, it's more of a churn, and you look at historical sales rates and look at how has that business performed historically, and look at the linearity and effectively seasonality and apply judgment. And in a business that's more of a direct sale, think of high-end video, it's typically a sales-driven process where there's a funnel and the funnel metrics, as Venkat said, and you look at the stages in the funnel and say opportunity to stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, stage 5 to close transaction, and we'll do a weighting of those. Now, where the CMO comes in, it's critically important, is measuring and managing that funnel. If we have a funnel that has a lot of stage 5 but very little stage 0, that might mean that this quarter's fine, but next quarter is in really bad shape. Mm-hmm. And so the CMO's job, in my opinion, is to really make sure they understand the nature of that funnel, and when things go off the track, what do? I look at every single day what our sales out is, how much are we selling out through the channel, and how much are we selling into the channel, daily shipments. And I look at the tracking. Are we on pace to deliver the results that we expect that quarter? In addition, weekly, we look at the pipeline with marketing, with sales, and say, what's the nature of the funnel? What are the big deals that are going to convert or not? And a great CMO is in front of sales, in front of finance, ahead of time saying, we have an issue, or boy, we've got opportunity. So that's the cadence for the stages that I think are just critically important.
So Fortella's rule number 5 is to communicate marketing's impact in the language of revenue. I believe that this connection to revenue is what enables marketing to communicate its impact in the language that their strategic stakeholders understand, so the marketing can be perceived as a strategic engine of growth. I believe today, more than ever before, CMOs really need to speak that language and have the visibility and the capabilities to turn revenue goals into revenue outcomes. That doesn't substitute from bad decisions or bad execution, but it will certainly help CMOs to be less perceived as a cost center.
The key reason why I've had fun in this company and continue to have fun is the role of marketing and how central it is to the overall bookings and revenues of the company. And the key element of that is my relationship with the CEO. About a year and a half ago when I started, he'd come to my desk, which unfortunately is only 20 steps away from his, come to my desk each day and ask me, how's the pipeline going? He used to ask me 3 times. Now he asks me only once a day. And so I guess that's an improvement. But what that demonstrates is that he recognizes the role of marketing and the importance of marketing. When we, as they say, when marketing catches a cold, the company catches pneumonia. And so he understands the role of marketing and how important it is, as opposed to, rewind the clock 10 years ago, 15 years ago, marketing often was thought of as a boat anchor. It was just something that you had to do.
Should CMOs have a quota like salespeople?
I believe they should. I mean, the quota could be elusive, though, because many companies are different. If you're a channel-led versus a direct, or a SaaS company versus but yeah, I think there should be a quota, and it should be measured based on effectively overall pipeline and funnel fullness.
at 8x8, I get to keep my job as a CMO if we meet the pipeline goals. And so having a target pipeline, or any target for that matter, and for our case, pipeline, is a very important metric, not just for me as a CMO, but also for the entire organization, because it helps us focus our attentions on where we need to deliver for the company, on what we need to deliver for the company.
Revenue-driven marketing is a strategy for connecting marketing execution to the company's revenue plan and making sure that you make decisions, act, execute, and communicate everything you do in the language of revenue.
Given that the most important thing that we can deliver to the company is bookings and pipeline, pipeline and therefore bookings, the most important thing for me is when we talk about revenue-driven marketing, it helps us focus the organization on the main thing that we're measured on, which is pipeline.
As a CFO, Rahul, revenue-driven marketing is a mindset that I think is overdue. I mean, in the past, I've seen marketing be kind of a scattershot or effectively like a shotgun approach to how you run your function as a cost center, and having the focus of revenue-driven marketing changes that to, I'm looking at the metrics of what is the return I'm getting on the marketing investment measured directly in terms of sales and end result of revenue and profitability. And as a CFO, those are the things you really, really care about. What am I spending money on? Is it spent appropriately that leads to growth of revenue and growth of profitability? And I think it's a mindset that I think many companies really could improve, quite frankly.
You really help to provide some useful tips to help CMOs frame their decisions, their actions, their communications in the language of revenue. So thank you. Our panelists talked a lot about how they've embraced the 5 rules of revenue-driven marketing and how that's impacted their businesses. But there are several other reasons for embracing these rules. First, it makes the job of the CMO much more fun to speak the language of revenue. It also makes the job of the CMO to be much more strategic and essential. And I believe it is really the key to thrive as a CMO in today's world.